Welcome into Raptors today. Akil Augustine, joined by Sherman Hamilton, Paul Jones. Big news in Raptor land, of course, today. Masai Ujiri speaking to the media, but the bigger news broke right before Masai addressed the press conference, and that was Nick Nurse out as the head coach of the Toronto Raptors. Sherm Jonesy, let's get your initial reaction. Sherm, I'll start with you. How did you find out? Where were you? And what do you think?
These things get leaked out way before they actually get mentioned, so I found out a little bit ago, but you know, it was interesting. I think the way the season went, it had a weird feeling to it. There was this lack of that usual feeling we have surrounding a Raptor season. And even the direst times, like in Tampa, where they had to figure things out, you still felt a certain energy about the team via transition. This was different. And, you know, it kind of culminated for me when Nick Nurse made those statements towards the end of the season. I felt he elaborated at a moment where it wasn't really required of him to elaborate, but I don't blame him for speaking his mind and how he felt. But it just felt like there was a difference in the vibe and the energy that was consistently following this team throughout the last seasons prior to this. So, and you know, Masai is the type of person that he's going to address it right away, and he's going to find a way to try and rectify the issue. So it was a bit of a expected, unexpected thing, if that even makes sense. You just knew a change was going to come, and the way Nick was talking, it seemed like there was an inkling like he might be the change.
The writing was on the wall.
Yeah, it just kind of had that vibe.
Yeah, I felt that there was, to Sherm's point about the energy, I felt that there was something missing. We didn't see those long runs of wins, and you know, Nick is a guy. Nick always talks about the kind of energy and trying to find flow within a game, and it might be different over the course of different nights. And I just kind of felt like that was missing, and you couldn't put your finger on it. And then when he came out in Philadelphia and said that was like, okay, hold on. If you thought, it has been confirmed. There's something going on here that needs to be changed, needs to be fixed. And when I heard Nick's comments, I frankly didn't know, was it a reaction to something that the Doug Smith story that was put out by management or put out by Nick's side? Regardless, there's a hole in the wall that needs to be fixed. It doesn't matter how it got there. It needs to be fixed. And that's kind of what I felt with the team. And, you know, when Masai talked about the last game mirroring the season, there was great excitement, success, and then it sputtered and it petered out. And in the end, there was great disappointment. So I just felt like I didn't know if it was going to be Nick. It was Nick. There still might be changes in players.
That was alluded to.
You heard Masai in a very kind of clandestine way saying we're making big changes when he was asked about other things. So I think the other shoe's going to drop, to use a figure of speech. I don't think this remake, this revamp of the team is quite done. And we know that sometimes when you make changes, for the fans out there, things get worse before they get better.
Yep.
You know, we always call that in education, when you change things around with kids or the system or the timetable, or there's chaos, the implementation dip. When you put it in, things get worse. When I change my golf swing every year, it gets worse before it gets better. So if things kind of, you know, just there needs to be a patience. But I just, you know, to your initial question, Akil, I just felt like something was coming and something was going to be done.
Well, it finally came. Now it's time to take you to the long-awaited Masai Ujiri end-of-season press conference. Well, actually, no, we're not going to go there. We're going to talk about more on this actually press conference. And let me ask you the next question here, because you mentioned more changes to come on all fronts. How big of a change can you expect?
I don't know. Sometimes the smallest changes lead to the biggest results. I mean, is it a case of good car, need a new driver, and then you tweak the car a little bit? I don't know, but there are going to be more changes, and I don't know how big they're going to be. I just, in that expression that I use, waiting for the other shoe to drop, I just feel there's going to be more changes. I don't know if they're going to be big or small. I mean, this was the biggest change, I think, in terms of who's leading the team. There will be others around the personnel, and I think they just fall in line with that comes at the top. The coaches change. Next thing is we change the roster. So if guys are moved in the offseason and there are big changes with the roster, I think it falls in line with what's going on to try to improve the team.
Well, we know some players are looking for a deal this summer.
Yes.
So obviously Masai Ujiri is going to have to look into that. And, there's obviously you make decisions moving forward based on how you feel whatever the player is fits into the program moving forward. I do think, though, that he also talked about, being able to kind of rebuild on the fly and how this kind of phase of the NBA is much more palatable to be able to do that instead of having to go all the way down to the bottom to work your way up. So, and what we've seen from the Raptors are the ability to develop talent while winning and still have to make roster changes to kind of move forward. So I expect them, obviously, to take some kind of a hit, but again, I just think that Masai Ujiri is so progressive in terms of how he views accomplishments. And when the ultimate goal is winning, and that's all that matters, the changes don't stop till you get there. So everything's in play. Anything's in play.
Yeah.
And to me, it's not desperation. It's real acceleration in terms of goal setting and achieving goals. So the changes to me, they're probably going to come in areas we might not expect it, and some we might expect, but they are going to be changes that are going to basically put this team on a path that Masai and Bobby think are going to put this team in a situation to win as quickly as possible.
All right. The identity of this group this year was a group that wanted to blitz on defense and a group that wanted to play fast. So we expect some changes. We don't know if that's going to be the sustained identity as this group moves forward. The pressure now is really mentioned by Masai Ujiri to validate that championship that they had, right? That's something that he wanted to do with Nick Nurse. Obviously, it won't happen with Nick Nurse, but there are two groups. There's a group when it comes to the fans that thought that this was a group that could validate that championship because of the leftovers from that 2019 runs, guys like Fred, guys like OG, guys like Pascal. And then there was the second group thinking maybe it's time for that revamp, rebuild, however you want to reframe that word. Where do you fall in line with the thinking on that?
I think it's valuable to have people that have been there before. And whether they've been there with you or in a different place, they can teach you that. And I think I think it's important to have those guys. But the NBA is fluid. I mean, the Raptors went from being out in the first round to the NBA championship the next year with basically one trade. And that's the way the league is now. I mean, you don't, as Sherm said, you don't have to go to the bottom. I mean, you can rebuild on the fly that with player empowerment and player movement. They talk about tampering. Well, I call it recruiting amongst players. Like that kind of stuff can happen. So in terms of validating the championship, yeah, because everybody looks at it and we still hear the rumblings. Well, if Durant was healthy and I mean, those of us that understand the game understand that injuries and all that stuff is part of it. And don't give me the hypothetical. Don't give me the if. It's nice to think that way, but this is what happened. So, and everybody says, well, you can do it once. It's a famous line from Michael Jordan, right? Anybody can do it once, but can you do it again?
That's what motivates Masai right now.
Exactly. You guys thought that we pulled this off, pulled a rabbit out of our hat, and it was a fluke. No, this is what our organization is about, and everything that you see that looks like desperation or changing directions, we're trying to win, right? The guy that invented something and throws all those pieces of paper in the waste paper basket and somebody says, you're wasting your time. He says, I'm not wasting my time. I know those don't work.
Several iterations.
And I think that's where Masai is now.
I think management needed a season like this to really assess how much this group could actually provide a winning culture and a chance to get to a championship level. And what management realized is that this group, as it's presently constituted, just isn't there yet. That this is not a championship level roster. And now the task becomes, what do you extract and what do you put in to make this a championship roster? So there's no question that, yes, you want to validate a championship because that means you're winning. And the goal is to win. So kind of kit and bundle about that is, if you win a championship and you win another one, you're still winning. Forget validating. You're just winning now. And I think that's what this team wants to do. But I don't think it ends here. I think there's a lot of moves to be made, because to get to that championship level, as we saw, there were a lot of moving parts in that whole scenario. LeBron James left the Eastern Conference, which had been the reason why, solely why the Raptors couldn't get over the hump.
And so many other teams.
100%. So that was a huge factor. So we talk about the fluidity of the NBA. Well, that's a big piece in terms of how the Raptors, you get Kawhi Leonard. Don't forget Danny Green. And then you bring in a Marc Gasol, who became, to me, the cherry on the sundae. And all of a sudden now you have a championship team with guys who had been there in terms of getting to the Eastern Conference Final. And now you put stars like Kawhi there and a piece like Mark, and all of a sudden you have this team. So we understand how quickly it can happen. And for the Raptors, having experienced that and knowing what it's like, they have a template. Now, it might not fall into the same line, but there's a template to quickly get there at times based on some pretty bold decisions and a few kind of calculated decisions that kind of add, like a Jakob Poeltl does. He might be the Marc Gasol before the Kawhi Leonard type of situation. So there's just a lot of ways, as we've heard, there's a lot of ways to cook chicken, right? It all can taste good.
Yes, very much so. So let's talk about kind of the big story everyone's going to walk away from today with is, of course, the end of the Nick Nurse tenure. And when Masai talked about that, he talked about what he witnessed with this group, which was complacency. Expand on that concept, Jonesy, if you will. The fact that watching this Toronto Raptors group, it seemed like things stagnated and weren't making the progress that we'd seen in most of the time that Nick Nurse was the head coach of this group.
I think for me it came with the results. The fact that this group put together, more was expected of them, and they didn't produce. And maybe that was to me, that's the complacency. I didn't see it in the preparation. I didn't necessarily see it in lack of effort. We're in an absolute, the NBA is an absolute bottom line business.
Yep.
It is, as Masai said. There's going to be 29 losers at the end of the year, right? And it's a line that from my childhood, from my parents. If you're not the lead dog, the views on the sled team, the views all the same. And so the complacency comes in the stagnation with the winning to me. You can do all that other stuff. A famous line from John Wooden, don't mistake activity for accomplishment. All that stuff happens, but if you're not accomplishing and moving forward, then it doesn't matter. So I would never point to Nick or any members of the coaching staff and say, well, they're complacent, they're not working hard. I look at this team, and they came out, I thought they played hard. They didn't always play smart. They didn't always play well, but they played hard. You have those games over the course of the year where it's not there that night. But then you have games where, the Atlanta Hawks, who are in the playoffs now, looked like nothing against the Toronto Raptors, right? Maybe it was one of those nights for Atlanta, but I didn't see the complacency in any of the other stuff. It stuck out in the bottom line, in the results, that the expectations weren't met, and it was time to make a change.
Yeah. From a results perspective, you think about Nick Nurse walking through the door as a head coach and winning a championship. That's a really high bar. Now, the expectation wasn't championship every year, but the bar is really high.
Yes.
And
you're painted into a corner.
And victim of your own success, which is a good thing to a certain extent. Now, having said that, I'm sure Masai and Bobby and that staff didn't look at it and say, well, you're not winning, so. But understanding that there's a level of expectation that comes with post-championship play. And ultimately, the Raptors just weren't able to maintain that. Now, is it possible? Probably not. I mean, you have dynasties like the Golden State Warriors where they were winning and it was like, okay, these guys have an expectation of excellence, and anything below that is a problem. The Lakers with Kobe and Shaq, it was championships or bust. San Antonio, championships or bust. I don't think that was the approach here. And to speak to the complacency, Masai spoke to something that was very, very interesting. He talked about selfishness creeping in.
Yep.
And we all know what selfishness can do to a situation in a team environment. It can really derail things. And when you have Masai talking about selfishness within the structure, then all of a sudden now complacency becomes a part of it. Stagnation can become a part of it. And then results do not fall where you want them to fall. So there's that trickle-down effect of what selfishness can do. So, and to me, when you see selfishness, you got to find it. You got to cut it out. It's not one of those things like a bad banana where, oh, it's a bit bad here, I'm just going to eat it. No, you got to cut it out and take it out. And for Masai Ujiri to figure that out and his staff to figure that out, you know, you've got to tinker with some things. You got to make some harsh decisions. And I'm glad that the situation with Nick Nurse went in a very amicable way, according to Masai, and because Nick Nurse deserved that. He did a great job as a Raptor head coach, and he did a great job for the city, for this country. He's completely ingrained into the society here, so I'm glad he deserved that. And I think moving forward, Nick Nurse is going to be viewed as a historical figure in this organization's history, and rightfully so, because his success as a coach is one thing, but the person he was is another thing. And he opened a lot of eyes about the variety that a coach can have and still be a person and still win on the court as well. So it's a sad day, but for Nick Nurse, you know, he's going to be all right. Yeah. Nick Nurse is going to have some suitors, so he's going to be all right.
To Sherm's point, Pat Riley, in his championship days with the Lakers and what he built with the Knicks in Miami, he always called that the disease of me. The selfishness and you know that stuff. There's not really a place for that. It's interesting because before we came in, I was on the phone with an executive from another team that said to me, "It was time," and I said, "What do you mean it was time?" And he said, "It had just run its course. Nick Nurse had done a terrific job, and it was the end of the road for that plan. And Nick Nurse, to Sherm's point, as we talk about it, should be celebrated for what he did in Toronto, what he brought to Toronto, the accomplishments that he, you know, that he was able to have in Toronto in terms of a championship." But he said, and you know, the old line that we always use, all good things, all great things eventually come to an end. So his thing was, well, and this is a long-time NBA person that has seen a lot more than me, and said it was just time. Shake hands, part ways. Good luck to you. Good luck to you. Away you go.
Speaking of things running their course now, another concept that the Raptors have to deal with, the front office has been selling us on Operation 6-9 across the board for a while. Is this something that the Toronto Raptors can continue to do and to sell whoever comes in to replace Nick Nurse on Sherm, or is this a vision that needs to be tweaked?
Well, whoever's coming in understands that's the mentality here. So you can't be sold. You better come in the door already sold on it and have a game plan on how you're going to make that work with the pieces that Masai and Bobby put in front of you. So I think this is not new news. The league knows this about the Raptors. They understand how they want to build and how they want to play. So I think if you're a head coach that is targeted for this position, I think it's a great position, number one. And there's only 30 of these jobs. And if you get an opportunity to coach a team like the Raptors, you should be very, very excited about it. But that style of play, you know, it might not be for traditionalists, but it definitely is an option for a creative coach, a coach that sees the game in a variety of ways and defensively understands how valuable having that general size or consistent size across the board and how it can help you in terms of your scheming on that side of the basketball. And I think ultimately this organization knows that the right coach with pieces put in will change everything. Look at Nick Nurse. He was the right coach at the time, and it changed everything. The right coach, right pieces, change everything. And that's going to be the task of the management to figure out what is that right coach.
I think that's the way the NBA has gone. We've watched the evolution of this game with the rules change and the player development and skill development. We've watched it go from stuff that we loved and was great competitive basketball in the late 80s and early 90s, where playoff games were won 83-79, to last night, there was 125 points put up in a playoff game. And that's the way it is. And to the new coach coming in today's NBA, where, the Phoenix Suns have Durant and Josh Okogie and Torrey Craig and these long, angular perimeter guys, and when they're healthy, Paul George and Kawhi Leonard and Amir Coffey, and you look at what's with the Clippers, you just look at all these guys. Jaren Jackson Jr. 15 years ago, he's planted under the basket as a big guy. Now he's out there shooting threes. So in Toronto, they've got those pieces that fit in today's NBA. So you're looking for a coach to come in and say, hey, man, we got these. It's not all 6'9" anymore. There is a big guy here. We're working on the development of some others. We might draft here, but this is what we are. What can you do with it? I'd love to be a fly on the wall in some of those interviews.
Speaking of some of those body types you just mentioned, let's talk about the future of this Toronto Raptors group. I remember one off season we went into, Masai spoke, with a lot of emphasis about internal growth. Well, you look at guys like Scotty Barnes, Delano Banton, the upcoming draft pick, depending on where it falls, it might be a very good opportunity for the Toronto Raptors to upgrade in that same position. Sherm, talk to me about what you can see from this young group, this bumper crop of players, knowing that the Raptors are limited in what they can do in free agency with the amount they are above that salary wall.
Well, when you talk about developing talent, it starts with Scotty Barnes. I mean, he is the most viable talent that can take that next step, and you can see a bright, bright future for him in terms of being an elite player in this league because of his versatility. And I think, the template for the Raptors has always been, you've got your key guys, but you're developing guys, i.e. the 905, and you're getting them the reps they need so when they come to the big team, they're prepared to at least accept smaller roles until they can create bigger spaces for themselves. And you look at the success. I mean, even guys who aren't here, Norm Powell, he's doing a great job in L.A. Jakob Poeltl went to San Antonio, came back, and we see the value he's bringing. Fred, Pascal, these guys were here.
DeLon Wright still in the league.
Yeah. So the development process for the Raptors has been very good. And I think we're going to see some of that with the Delanos, a guy who's going to get some opportunities. And I just feel like beyond that, that's one kind of phase of the Raptors moving forward. They'll consistently try to develop young talent and utilize resources to get what they put in out of them. But they've got to make some moves with the main guys as well. They've got to figure out how these main guys fit together because you can't win with young talent. You need veteran guys. You need guys who've been around the block who can produce night in, night out. And to me, that's the bigger question moving forward. How do they find the pieces? If they don't feel the pieces they have can translate into a championship level, how do they rectify that? Where do they find the pieces? Who do they remove from the equation to bring in to fit this structure? It's a lot of moving parts. I don't worry about the development side of the Raptors. They've been so good at that.
Yeah, they always have been. I keep coming back to this and how quickly, there will be internal development. This is when players are made. That's the old adage. A player is made when the lights go down. The lights are down for the Raptors right now. So all of the young guys, you take that playoff loss and you wear it on your shirt when you're working in the gym. But the nature of the league is, and again, Masai referred to it, it's fluid right now. You can make a couple of changes with the right pieces and jump. I mean, you look at, I keep taking what happened between the Brooklyn Nets and the Phoenix Suns. The Phoenix Suns were in a different space. We want to win, and we want to win now. And that deal for Kevin Durant that was out there was never made before. Now the ownership changes, the philosophy changes, boom, there it is. So you have to have internal development because those are your support pieces. But at the same time, in terms of your main people, those are the pieces that you're able to move around to get better players in or make moves to get more experienced people in as a path to a championship.
And having said that, I mean, the internal development, the biggest issue I found for the Raptors this season was their inability to shoot the ball consistently.
Yeah.
They really struggled with that. You know this. You go to any gym.
Get in the gym, man.
You roll the ball out. The first thing a player is going to do is probably dribble it and shoot it.
Yeah.
They're going to shoot the ball. So that kind of internal growth, development is a factor for the key guys as well. Everybody's got to become a better shooter on this team.
The percentages were down against their career averages.
Look, and think about how this season could have been ever so different with a few more made shots at crucial points.
Yeah. I mean, we saw that development when Dwayne Casey came in with Kyle, with DeMar.
Yep.
Like, it wasn't just, Jakob and Pascal and Fred. And it was like, hey, you guys, you need to do this too. You need to get in the gym. And we talk about how DeMar always came back with something else and built his toolbox. Same with Kyle. He became a better shooter. All of these things. So, I mean, you look at Fred VanVleet. Nick Nurse told him, well, you know what? You can shoot it from back there. Shoot it. Stretch the floor more. Shoot it from back there. Pull the defense out. I mean, there's a stat out there where only Steph Curry took more shots from a certain range than Fred. So the internal development is there for all the guys, as Sherm mentioned. Yeah.
All right, as we walk into the summer, final thoughts from you gentlemen. I'll start with you, Sherm. Looking at this Toronto Raptors in the summer they have ahead of them.
A lot of decisions. And personnel-wise, you just don't know what it's going to look like. So I think I'm really interested to see, number one, who they bring in as a head coach. As Masai said, they want to get that settled before the draft, which makes sense. But then, okay, what are you going to do once free agency kicks in? How are you going to handle people, the money that might be desired? And then what you add to this mix. There's just so many pieces that have to be filled right now that it's not like last year where you knew a certain group was coming back and you understood, okay, this guy's got to be a better shooter. This guy's got to work on his handle. Defensively, this guy – it's different now.
You're talking to agents this summer.
We're talking a totally different summer for this organization. So, to me, I want to see the coach first. I want to see who the coach is, and I think from there then we'll start to figure out the style of play, what pieces that are here that still fit, and then how they want to spend the money.
There's going to be a revamp, and it's started. We've seen it. And in the context of wanting to win, Masai and Bobby are going to do that. They've started to revamp. They've made a tough decision on a championship coach, and they're going to bring other pieces in. They're going to make other moves, and then they're going to sit back, and there's a patience component to this too, because we don't know what the start of next year is going to look like. And if they jump out of the gate and win 8 of the first 10, that doesn't mean there isn't going to be a part where it dips too. So the moves are made now, and then you have to sit back and be patient and let it marinate. And I think we got to the point with this year's team where they did that. They were patient enough, and they knew what they knew, and the moves had to be made.
All right, well, that does it for this season's Raptors Today squad. We want to thank you guys for watching. An interesting year. Nick Nurse out. That's the final day. Masai's comments up online. And we want to give a shout-out to everybody who worked on the show this year. Of course, Sherm, Jonesy, Savannah Hamilton, but also our producers, Jake and Nikhil, Jasmine, Sarah, and Hanya. Our editors, Lloyd, Luke, Brandon, Garth, Evan McDermott, and Evan Paniker, and our graphics team of Jeff and Justin. That does it for us. We'll see you at some point in the summer.